So today we are talking about intranets. Now, hold on, just before you go off, it's definitely worth sticking around because intranet is far too often known as a place where information goes to die or where productivity goes to die. But actually, if done right, intranets can absolutely be a core part of productivity within an organization, communication within an organization, and elevating employee engagement. So we've got just the person to chat with today. That's Ben Leach. How you doing, Ben?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Thanks, Chris.
So, well, actually, we were talking I think last week about this when we were prepping, and you were like in the thick of running workshops connected to an internet project. So, it's like, well, yeah, when Ben tells me how he's like, living and breathing internet, it's like, well, yeah, that's a great example of that. So I'll stop guessing on, but yeah, let's give a bit of a quick intro about yourself, Ben, and the organisation you work for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Ben. I've been working with SharePoint since about 2008. I've worked for a few different organizations, and more recently, I formed Information EXP with my business partner, Rupert. So we
Nice.
started that, interestingly. In fact, Rupert and I teamed up the week before the first lockdown. So when COVID hit,
Oh,
we thought
wow.
that was a perfect time to start business. So that has been quite an interesting experience. But traditionally with SharePoint, a lot of the historic projects that I've been working on have been focused on intranets. What I would say to that, particularly in the SharePoint space, up until some of the more recent technology, referred to as modern SharePoint, which has been around for quite a while now, actually, a lot of the effort in intranet projects, certainly from a sort of consulting side, was about just trying to make SharePoint not sort of look so bad, actually, and actually,
Right, okay.
look good and be useful as a tool. So they used to be actually quite technology heavy projects, whereas, like them or love them, what Microsoft have done with what Microsoft have done with modern SharePoint, they've made it a bit more restrictive in terms of how much you can customize it, but they've really focused on actually the content and the process. So that's meant that we've actually had to change the way we think about doing internet projects and really focus on, it's all about the content, what you're trying to do with it, what's the purpose of the intranet, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been an interesting journey, obviously, as I've been sort of, learning, over the past 15 years as well. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, actually, you can have all the best kind of tech under the bonnet, but if that experience isn't as good as it can be,
Yeah.
UX isn't dealt with, or even more particularly that the thinking up front isn't done properly, then it's just you're just trying to throw technology at a problem without and expecting it to work. And we know it's not a silver bullet, even if the technology is going to be absolutely top grade. So I like what you say. And you're celebrating 5-year anniversary soon in business.
Yeah, I suppose we are. I'm trying to think.
2020, wasn't it? Yeah, it's coming up to that point.
Yeah, I mean, so I went independent in 2019, but then Rupert and I sort of teamed up. But you're absolutely right, actually. I've kind of lost just looking at the clock.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, it is literally coming up to 5 years when we properly teamed up and said, yeah, let's do this thing together. So Rupert and I worked together at a previous company and worked together for about 5 years before that. And then we both ended up leaving that organization, and for different reasons, but it just became a kind of logical fit. Sometimes it's that thing where you know that person you're working with, and you know what their sort of pros and cons are and their sort of weaknesses and strengths, etc., and it just seemed like a logical thing. But yeah, it's an interesting experience, that first 6 months of no pipeline, no customers, go anywhere. So yeah.
Yeah. I started my business around the same few months before. So yeah, I know what you mean. So, okay, I mean, let's start off with, based on your experience and all the conversations and workshops and implementations you've done around the intranet, what in your mind makes a great intranet? And people have gone through into looking at, when you ask them about their internet, they got a big smile on their face and going, "Yep, it's absolutely ticking boxes." What makes an internet great?
I mean, if I was going to put maybe a really simplistic response, the success of the internet really is about people, right? It's not it's not about technology. Historically, I think technology was almost a bit of an excuse for an intranet not being any good or not being effective, whereas that's really not an excuse anymore. But a good intranet has people that are actively contributing content. It has clear, it has a clear purpose in terms of what it's meant to do. It's not just this, completely devolved space where there's inconsistent adoption and different content authors, publishing content in slightly different ways, or you end up with lots of spaces that are empty. It has a clear purpose, and it is delivering to that purpose with clear, accountability, responsibilities, governance, and it's really bought into from the top all the way down. It's considered a strategic tool for the organization and not just a sort of vanity project, if you see where I'm coming from.
Okay. So I suppose then in the spirit of starting off on the right foot, then actually let's talk about that a bit actually. So what kind of things, is best practice when it's going right? We need to build a new intranet or relook at our intranet. What are the things that kind of set everything up on the right foot in terms of the approach you take and the people you get involved?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is, as I say, if we come back to that purpose, there needs to be an exercise where people are clear on what it's going to do. And in my experience, I've found that intranets are really there to achieve two key things. One is they are to support engagement within the organization. That's kind of obvious thing, right? It's there about supporting culture, engagement, news, all that stuff, making people feel connected, etc. Brand identity, that type of thing. The side, it's a productivity tool, having a central place that people can go. They don't have to go and try and find the most up-to-date version of a template, or it's been hidden away in someone's file share somewhere. They can ask questions quickly so that they can be focused. And it's really dependent on what size organization is the organization, based in lots of different locations and people can't get together. If you're all in the same place, you're in the same office and everyone's coming into work the same day, maybe you don't need lots and lots of engagement in the intranet, because a lot of that's going to happen where you work in the office, and maybe the productivity.
Yeah, fair point.
So yeah.
Nice. No, I think that's a really good point actually, because it really is a case by case situation, isn't it? Which means that kind of questioning up front is really important, and don't assume that an intranet's an intranet there's an intranet, And I think that example of what if you're all in the same place on the same days, and actually you don't need so much of the water cooler moments because you're going to get that. And actually you could argue that, well, there might be, albeit they may be integrated, but there'll be other platforms out there, that will be using that, whether it's Slack or whether it is, say, MS Teams, or actually people want to stay in MS Teams and have those kind of engagement type conversations, but then use the internet to be able to access the information in the right way. Yeah. What typical size companies, of employees do you tend to work with then?
So in terms of our organization, I would say our average company size is somewhere between 100 to 500 members of staff. Now, that said, we've got organizations that are much higher than that. So, approaching, I think our largest organization we work with is maybe about 4,000 or 5,000 people. Now, bear in mind, we do a range of things. So we do intranets, but we also do document management systems and policy management systems and stuff as well. So it's not necessarily that we're, it's purely intranet projects for everything. So there'll be a range of that. But when it comes to the intranet projects that we do, then yeah, it is in that sweet spot generally of sort of 100 to 500. I mean, what I would say is that when we started, we were doing smaller organizations as well. So we do have customers, 30 people to 50 people, up to 100. And again, when we were first starting, it's like, what do those people need an intranet? And actually, for them, it became much more about the productivity side, right? So because again, they were
Mm.
smaller, they connected, they talked to each other, they had a Teams chat where they would talk to each other every day, so they didn't need that side of it, but they did need a central place they could go. So so yeah.
And with is it fair to say that there are probably enough employees out there having this experience to warrant this as a question? Is that why is it that people don't go to intranets as much as the people who build them would like them to?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yeah,
build it and they will come. Build it, they will come. Is that no? It doesn't work.
that's a good question. It's quite a loaded question. No, it is a good question. Why don't they go to it? Maybe
Because that's a failing,
people
isn't
don't
it? I mean,
care.
ultimately, you can have all of you can have the
Yeah,
best internet around, but if people don't go to it, then it's pointless. Absolutely pointless, isn't it?
it's so true, because I know that there is often a lot of maybe concern about why isn't everyone engaging with this news story that we shared, and we want everyone to read every news story. And I did have one customer once that said, we're going to make it that it's enforced that everyone has to go to the intranet once a day. And I thought, well, sort of, mate, it's kind of missing the point a bit. I mean, the reason, to answer your questions, I said if they don't go to it, it's because they don't care about it. And why don't they care about it? I'd say there's probably a slightly more difficult question that needs to be answered there, which is it's probably because they're not feeling particularly engaged with the organization as a whole, and they don't really care about what is put on the news. I do, as I say, I do think there is this balance between engagement and productivity. I would like to think that if on the productivity side, if the resources are there and there is a need to go to the intranet because people need to access or find something out, and that they can do that easily. If they can't do that, it's because the content hasn't been organized well, it's not easy to navigate, the search doesn't work. And just to be clear, these are all criticisms that I've heard from customers that are trying to redo their intranet. And literally the one that I'm working on right now, where they've got even some stuff in SharePoint, but it's just difficult to find it. It's inconsistent.
Okay.
So on the productivity side, if people are not going to it, often it's because they've lost confidence that the content is actually relevant and they're going to find the thing that they need. Content's out of date, etc., etc. On the flip side, if they're not going to it from the engagement side, then in a lot of cases it's because they're not engaged. And I do think there is sometimes this kind of misconception, perhaps, that you're going to put this wonderful, shiny new intranet in place and it's going to fix your organizational culture. But the
Yes,
reality is,
absolutely.
if you've got a rubbish organizational culture, if people feel really unsafe at work, if people feel like they're worried about their jobs, or actually like there's loads of staff turnover and they feel that the SLT doesn't actually care or listen to them, then putting an intranet is not going to fix that. If anything, it's probably going to make it worse, actually, because people know it's not authentic. So yeah, that's maybe a flippant response. I don't know.
No, it's good. No, I like that because I think it's you can replace internet with like a company away day or company conference, or the annual company party or something, or an internal communications campaign, employee engagement campaign,
Yeah,
which is wrapped around a survey but is posted on a wall, or on a virtual wall. It's the incremental actions every single day
that's
that
right.
ultimately create your culture, isn't it? So
Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
wider strategic piece there, which is the technology, or the transactional piece is not gonna it contributes to it, but it's not your culture. And so therefore you need to have wider kind of reflections as an organization about your culture and about the behaviors in your organization. I think that's
yeah,
absolutely right. And it's I can imagine your workshops that you're doing, will be touching on that, which is like, you know, this can do this, but actually, maybe there's some wider conversations that need to be had around
yeah,
around what people think about your culture. How often do you do your do your surveys with employees? Oh, we do it annually. You know,
yeah.
and we
Exactly.
and we and, and we say that on anonymous, but we ask them where the location is and what their job role is and how long
Yeah,
they've been there.
yeah, that's right. Nothing's ever really
You
anonymous.
know,
Yeah,
yeah, no, exactly. So no, I think you raise a very, it's certainly not flippant. I think it's very good. Very very good point. And it's so, and think about it. There's quite a lot of, I can relate to it basically from what you're saying, because my work with intranets has been few and far between, or I have done years ago, worked on a few internet projects, but still boils down to the thing about what do the audience want and how is it going to help the audience. So if they see an intranet as being a utility, fantastic. If they see the internet as being a place they can learn something that's going to help them with their job, then they'll go to it.
yeah,
So it can be the best. You can have all the best content around. Well, no, it can be a well-built project, but ultimately, if it's not answering the question, what's in it for me,
yeah.
then it doesn't work.
I mean, I think there's another point that you've just got me sort of thinking about there as well, which is such a common thing, which is often with internet projects, if we think, first of all, we have this situation where at the beginning, there needs to be a real clear purpose as what we're trying to do. SLT need to be bought in. If it's something that is going to be IT led, and there's no SLT buy-in, for instance, you're just going to struggle because people aren't going to care.
Yeah,
But on top of that, there's going to be all this effort and all of this, noise and excitement during the intranet project, and it's going to be, there's going to be this big, launch party. Everyone's going to get really excited and all that kind of stuff, and that's great as well. But what about a year later? That's the thing. We just find this so often, which is, people put all the effort. Maybe someone got seconded into the project to be able to start putting all this content in, but then the internet launches and they go on to something else, and then you find that actually they're just not keeping it up to date and it's stale, and we're 18 months down the line, maybe some people that were involved originally, they left, and then some new people came in and they didn't have the training, they didn't keep it up to date, and then you're sort of back to square one, and then you'll kind of think, oh well, there's this new technology platform out there that's going to be better and going to fix all up. Maybe AI is going to fix it all for us, so we don't need an internet or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always this issue of how do you keep it maintained. And just a point about that one, again, one of the things I'm sort of talking to customer about at the moment is actually there is often this perception in an intranet that like every department needs a page. Every department needs a page because they all need to feel included and feel that they've got their say and they can all talk about it. But I go back to them and say the intranet is a tool, and you should focus on the teams that are going to contribute to the intranet to serve that productivity side of things, and don't just create lots of spaces, because the intranet is not democracy, right? It doesn't need to be a democracy to feel that all of the content creators are included. You need to be thinking about who the audience are. Your customer of the intranet is your staff, so it needs to be cohesive and it's addressing those staff's needs. So there's nothing worse than having lots of spaces that are empty because someone felt they wanted to talk about themselves. So I tend to try and say to people, pare it back to what you really need. Focus on the productivity side, those support functions in the organization like HR and IT and these things that need to create content, and maybe there's some key operational things, so focus on that. And then perhaps create a space where some of these other departments working with internal comms can just share news stories. They don't need a site, but they can share some news stories about, exciting things that have happened, and maybe even incorporate something like Viva Engage to support some of that two-way dialogue and conversation. So yeah, and the point being, after I've been jabbering away for a bit, or yammering away, or engaging away.
Oh yeah, yammer. I like yammer. That's a good idea. Yeah.
Is the point really is, if you can keep the focus in terms of who needs to create the content, and if you can keep that more focused, and particularly within roles in support functions where it's kind of their job to do this stuff anyway, then you're not going to have that situation a year down the line when all of that content's out of date, because their job is to keep it up to date because it makes it easier to support the organization. But when you try and have the sales team need to have a space to be able to promote themselves. Well, they're not going to do that because they're going to be out selling things, or if you, I guess that's the point. Is like focus on who really need, what areas do you really need? What do you need people to know about? What do you want to share about? And maybe ask your comms team to support you with that. And just try and keep it more focused so that you don't end up with lots of stale content because you involve too many people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, really good. I think it's because it's about being, I like what you say, because it really is about being very clear about what an intranet for that particular organization is for and what it isn't for. So there's that, and that's kind of it's quite a bit of a reassurance for somebody to be clear about what it is for, what it isn't for, so they can then say somebody to somebody else, well, that's great, that can fit in there. Well, actually, we don't need that because we've got something else that can do that for you.
Yeah.
And also the second thing you say about it being part of people's jobs, but actually then bringing people in, maybe not just getting the marketing. I'm sure I'm probably stealing your own words here from when we're prepping for this, but if you just get, say, your marketing team, because they build websites to then build the intranet, and they just go off for the next project, that will probably fall on its feet. But if you actually involve somebody who is its job to provide, like HR, someone from HR whose their job is to make sure that people can access policies in the right way, or they can book something in the right way. And actually, if they're part of the development process, kind of add that part of a steering group or workforce, work group, then there's more chance they're gonna feel part of it and also sustain it. And that has a trickle-on effect across everyone else, doesn't it?
Yeah, I do sometimes get a bit nervous when I start working on an organization and find that it's going to be the marketing team that's running it. You see that a lot in smaller organizations, and it's kind of understandable because they're the ones that are a bit more, in smaller organizations that may not be big enough yet. I'm talking about the sort of 50 to 100. Maybe they're not big enough yet to have someone in a more formal internal comms role, for instance, perhaps. And maybe that comes from marketing, and marketing is serving both, obviously promoting themselves outside the organization, but doing some of that comms internally. You will see marketing being the sponsors of intranets a bit more. But I think, really, if you're a bigger organization, if you're a sort of, 100 above, 250, for instance, then it really should be being run by HR and comms because, as I said, it's a tool to serve your employees. It's not just to broadcast. Because we then get back to that point earlier, and you were saying, why is it that people aren't looking? It's because they don't care what you've got to say, right? If all you're doing is talking about your just resharing the stuff that you've got on your public facing news site and resharing that internally, then people don't really care as much. I mean, yes, it's useful to have some visibility on what they're saying, but they could go to your website for that. And I know sometimes they do it because they say, well, it means that I can reduce the amount of effort I need to do in creating content, but that's not the point, really, is it? So it's so I do get a bit nervous.
You're right. It's kind of the element of feeling that there's some sort of exclusivity to things as well. Is that actually we're creating this particularly for you, our employees, or for you in this particular department, because you won't get that anywhere else. And actually, this is going to be valuable to be able to do that, rather than just putting something that feels very press releasey out and saying, "Oh, go and read that," because you'll find out about our CEO. And actually, where you want to do in the CEO situation is the CEO maybe doing a video on the intranet, which is we've done our employee survey, and actually I've been doing a fact find around the organization, and I really appreciate the time you've all given to us, and these are my findings, and more importantly, this is what we're going to do off the back of it. Straight away, it's like, oh wow, being listened to. Brilliant. So what did he find? Did other people think the same way I did, or is there anything else that's new? So I think that changes everything, really. That exclusivity, I think, is very important.
It's so true, because again, it comes back to the point of what's the intranet for. The intranet is to support engagement and culture in the organization. It's not to replace it, but it's to support that. Whereas your website, marketing are generally more aligned to promoting the organization to its customers and to win new customers, whereas the intranet is to support the needs of staff. And I think you're absolutely right there with that point about it's going to seem so much more authentic if the CEO, records a video, or maybe they run a town hall meeting over Microsoft Teams or other tool, and they record that and they go and publish that onto the intranet so people can feel that they can connect with what that person has to say and how they're going to address and listen to the concerns or praise, feedback, etc. If you're just regurgitating the stuff that you're putting inside, then it kind of almost suggests that maybe you don't care about what your employees are thinking, right? Because you just think about what you want
absolutely.
them to see.
Yeah, it's just tick box, isn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, I think if thinking about kind of what's in it for the individual, and the thing about usability is if a CEO is doing a town hall, they can say, look, if you've got some questions you want answered right now, then join it. But you know what? If you're busy, you can watch the recording, and guess what? You can watch it at 1.5 speed. And half the time, reduce the time by, X percentage and how long it's going to take to watch it. You're still going to find out what's going on, but actually you're giving the value, the amazing gift of time back to somebody. It's what people do all the time when it comes to promoting, training events, and, you see YouTubers do it as well. I always say, look, you can learn a lot from YouTubers, but it's like, come back later and watch it at your own convenience, without losing out on.
I was trying to learn
the content.
I was trying to learn some tech stuff the other day, and I was looking at a particular training page on how to talk to this software products API, and I tried to watch the video, and I think it was host. I don't know where it was, either host on YouTube or somewhere else, and I immediately went to the settings button to put it on 1.5 speed because they were talking quite slow, and there was no playback speed option, and I was like, I can't believe you've done that to me.
Oh no, it's brutal.
I know there's a quality thing, but they disabled the playback speed option. I was like, that's just, I don't know, it's just rude.
So I think that's just an appreciation of someone's time, isn't it? And actually, you can still, you don't have to just rock up and attend the whole thing. You can reduce the time and not actually lose out on anything, because we do actually speak quite slowly, even when we speak quickly. If you increase it, then it's no problem. But anyway, that could be another episode. But
exactly.
No, look, really appreciate it. I think I think what we'll do is make sure when we get this episode out, tag you on LinkedIn. So if anyone's got any questions, then by all means jump on the post and get in touch with myself or Ben. And that's what LinkedIn is for. It is a great place to connect, but great to connect means let's just have some conversations about it. So if anyone's interested about chatting Intranets more, then by all means get in touch. No, thanks, Ben. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Exactly. Good man. Thanks, Ben.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot.